Welcome to this new episode, brought to you by Vault of 15, your #1 top 15 list maker. This time, we dive into some of the darkest corners of human belief. Across history and into our own time, cult leaders have lured followers with promises of love, truth, or salvation, only to trap them in systems of fear, control, and manipulation. In this episode, we'll explore the top 15 most disturbing cult documentaries, each revealing the chilling reality of devotion turned dangerous. From hidden compounds to live stream rituals, these films expose how ordinary people can be drawn into extraordinary nightmares. Prepare yourself. The truth behind these stories is more unsettling than fiction. Number 15. Love Has Won, The Cult of Mother God. Amy Carlson, known to her followers as Mother God, didn't just claim to be a spiritual teacher. She declared herself a divine being who had lived countless lives, including Jesus Christ, Cleopatra, and Joan of Arc. At first glance, her group, Love Has Won, looked like just another corner of the New Age internet, filled with talk of higher vibrations, healing energies, and the promise of spiritual ascension. But beneath the cosmic language was a tightly controlled world where Carlson's word was absolute law. Recruits often arrived seeking love or enlightenment, but found themselves drawn into a hierarchy where devotion meant obedience. Members were pressured to cut ties with their families, hand over savings, and endure emotional abuse disguised as spiritual discipline. Carlson herself was often filmed berating followers for low vibrations, a tactic that kept them fearful yet loyal. Reports of sleep deprivation, strange diets, and verbal humiliation paint a picture of a group that thrived on control rather than compassion. What set Love Has Won apart from older cults was its visibility. Carlson and her followers broadcast live streams for hours every day, turning their inner world into a strange theater of devotion. In these recordings, she appeared erratic, sometimes incoherent, but always worshipped. Her physical decline was visible, yet her devotees insisted her pain was evidence of her sacrifice for humanity. Number 14. The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin. Gwen Shamblin Lara first rose to fame in the 1980s with her Way Down workshop, a Christian-based diet program that blended scripture with weight loss. For many, she appeared to be a beacon of discipline and spiritual strength. But as her influence grew, so did her ambition, and soon Shamblin had built more than a brand. She had created a kingdom. At the center of this world was the Remnant Fellowship Church, a tight-knit congregation in Tennessee, where Shamblin's teachings ruled every aspect of life. Followers were told that obedience to God and to Gwen was the only path to salvation. Questioning her authority was unthinkable. Behind the glossy sermons and smiling choirs, former members described a darker reality: intense control, public shaming, and a demand for total loyalty. Families fractured, individuality was erased, and members were taught to equate thinness with holiness. The documentary pulls back the curtain on Shamblin's transformation from diet guru to cult leader. Her towering blonde hair and glittering stage presence became symbols of power, while her church grew wealthier and more insular. Parents were accused of enforcing extreme discipline, members were pressured into conformity, and critics alleged that shame and fear replaced faith and love. When Shamblin expanded her empire, it wasn't just about weight loss anymore. It was about control over bodies, minds, and even relationships. The smiling image she projected to the world concealed a rigid, authoritarian structure where obedience was worship and questioning was sin. Number 13. The Family. The documentary The Family investigates one of Australia's most disturbing cults, led by Anne Hamilton Byrne. Unlike many cult leaders, Hamilton Byrne was a glamorous woman who presented herself as both a spiritual teacher and the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Behind her polished appearance, however, was a world built on secrecy, control, and abuse. The family began in the 1960s, attracting professionals and intellectuals who were drawn to Hamilton Burns' blend of yoga, New Age spirituality, and apocalyptic prophecy. At the heart of her movement was a group of children, some adopted legally, others taken illegally, who were raised in isolation at a property known as Lake Eldon. Survivors describe a strict regime where children were dressed identically, their hair dyed blonde, and their identities stripped away. They were told Hamilton Byrne was their mother and were forced to follow her every command. Discipline was brutal. Beatings, drugs, and psychological abuse kept them submissive. The documentary reveals how Hamilton Byrne maintained influence through a network of doctors, lawyers, and professionals who shielded the cult from scrutiny. For decades, authorities struggled to penetrate the group's secrecy. It wasn't until the 1980s that police and child welfare officials finally intervened, rescuing many of the children who had grown up hidden from the world. Through testimony and archival footage, the family exposes how one woman's charisma created a system of fear and control that destroyed childhoods and left scars lasting a lifetime. Number 12. Escaping twin flames. At first glance, the Twin Flames universe looked like a harmless online community promising love and connection. Run by Jeff and Shalaya Ayan, it claimed to help members find their one true partner, their twin flame, the perfect mirror of their soul. But what seemed like a modern dating movement quickly spiraled into something far darker. Through live streams, courses, and coaching packages, the Ayans sold the idea that anyone could find eternal love if they followed their teachings. Followers, many of whom were lonely or heartbroken, clung to the promise of destiny. Yet the price of belonging soon went beyond money. Members were pressured to pursue relationships at any cost, even if the other person wasn't interested. Some were told to stalk partners who had rejected them, reframing obsession as devotion. The documentary reveals how the Twin Flames leaders manipulated their followers into surrendering control over their lives. They encouraged people to cut ties with families, push them into relationships they didn't want, and even pressured some into changing their gender identity in order to fit the divinely ordained match they had assigned. Behind the glossy language of love and self-discovery was a system of coercion and control, wrapped in the modern packaging of social media coaching. The Ayans positioned themselves as the ultimate authority on romance, dictating who should be with whom and shaming those who resisted. What began as a search for love turned, for many, into a loss of autonomy, a stark reminder that even the promise of affection can be weaponized when people are desperate enough to believe. Number 11. Heaven's Gate, the cult of cults. In the 1970s, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles created a movement that would become one of the most infamous cults in American history. Known as Heaven's Gate, it promised followers a path to salvation, not through religion, but through leaving Earth entirely. The group believed they were destined to ascend to a higher plane aboard an alien spacecraft, leaving behind their human vehicles. For years, Applewhite gathered a devoted group of followers who gave up their families, possessions, and identities to pursue this cosmic mission. Members lived communally under strict rules. Celibacy was mandatory, individuality erased, and obedience absolute. They dressed alike, cut their hair the same, and even adopted new names, all to shed their human attachments. To outsiders, it might have seemed eccentric. To insiders, it was a sacred calling. The HBO documentary, Heaven's Gate. The Cult of Cults reveals how this belief system tightened its grip over time. Through archival footage and interviews, it shows the eerie calmness of members who spoke of leaving Earth as if it were a joyous graduation. Their devotion to Applewhite was total, their lives a constant rehearsal for the day they would depart. In March of 1997, that moment came. 39 members were found dead inside a California mansion, dressed in identical black uniforms with purple shrouds covering their bodies. Each had consumed a lethal cocktail of barbiturates and alcohol, believing they were boarding the spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. Number 10. Jesus Camp. Released in 2006, Jesus Camp shocked audiences with its unfiltered look inside an evangelical summer camp for children in North Dakota. Run by Pastor Becky Fisher, the camp aimed to train kids to become God's army, instilling them with uncompromising religious fervor at an age when most children are still learning basic independence. The documentary follows several children as they pray, speak in tongues, and are taught that they must fight against sin, abortion, and secularism. Images of kids weeping at the altar or laying hands on a cardboard cutout of President George W. Bush highlighted just how deeply political and militant the atmosphere could become. Fisher herself declared that she was raising warriors for a spiritual battle that would shape America's future. What made Jesus Camp so unsettling was not violence or secrecy, but its openness. Parents proudly enrolled their children, convinced they were giving them the strongest possible foundation of faith. The children, however, spoke with a gravity far beyond their years, repeating Fisher's words as if they were their own. Scenes of kids crying over their supposed sins, or being told that rejecting God meant eternal damnation, revealed the immense weight placed on such young shoulders. The film became one of the most controversial documentaries of its time, sparking heated debates about religious freedom, indoctrination, and the line between faith and fanaticism. By focusing on the innocence of children caught in a larger cultural struggle, it captured a side of American evangelicalism that few outside the movement had ever witnessed so directly. Number 9. The Deep End. The Deep End is a chilling 4-part series that explores the world of Teal Swan, a self-proclaimed spiritual teacher with millions of online followers. Marketed as a healer for trauma and depression, Swan built a devoted community around her teachings, which mix self-help language with controversial practices that critics say verge on psychological manipulation. The series gives viewers rare access inside Swan's inner circle. Cameras capture her retreats, private meetings, and the way she handles her followers, many of whom are vulnerable individuals seeking hope. What unfolds is a portrait of a leader who demands loyalty while claiming to offer unconditional love. Her charisma is undeniable, but so is the intensity of her control. One of the most disturbing aspects of Swan's teachings is her repeated focus on death as an escape from suffering. Former followers claim that this obsession created a dangerous environment for people already struggling with suicidal thoughts. The documentary shows how her team manages dissent, silences criticism, and tightly controls Swan's image online, presenting her as a flawless guide while suppressing troubling realities. Unlike cults hidden in remote compounds, Swan's movement exists in plain sight, broadcast through YouTube, Instagram, and live streams. The accessibility of her message, polished, modern, and spiritual, allows it to spread rapidly, reaching people across the globe. For those who enter her world, however, the cost of belonging can mean losing independence, relationships, and even the ability to question her authority. Number 8. Daughters of the Cult. The docu-series Daughters of the Cult uncovers the terrifying legacy of Ervil LeBaron, a polygamous sect leader whose reign of control left a trail of fear and bloodshed across generations. Known as the Mormon Manson, LeBaron preached that he was God's chosen prophet, and anyone who defied him faced violent retribution. Through the voices of his own daughters and family members, the documentary reveals how life inside the cult meant constant fear and unquestioned obedience. Women and children were forced into arranged marriages, bound by doctrines that placed them entirely under the authority of men. Families lived in isolation, with loyalty to Ervil valued above even blood ties. His teachings sanctioned murder against dissenters and rivals, creating a culture where killing was framed as divine justice. The series goes beyond Ervil himself to show how his violent commandments continued to echo long after his death. His network of followers, often referred to as a blood cult, carried out dozens of assassinations, convinced they were fulfilling holy orders. The generational trauma of those left behind is visible in the testimonies of women who describe growing up surrounded by secrecy, abuse, and fear that loyalty could never be enough. Number 7. Holy Hell. Holy Hell is told through the eyes of Will Allen, a filmmaker who spent more than 2 decades inside a group known as the Buddha Field. At its center was Mikkel Rostan, a charismatic figure who presented himself as a guru of love, meditation, and spiritual awakening. To outsiders, the community seemed idyllic, sun-soaked gatherings, dance, and a promise of inner peace. For those inside, it was a life defined by devotion to Rostan. Members surrendered their time, money, and loyalty, convinced he held the key to enlightenment. The Buddha Field rejected traditional religion, instead focusing entirely on Rostan's vision. His followers lived communally, rehearsing theatrical performances, practicing endless rituals, and reinforcing each other's belief in his divinity. Behind the smiles and serene atmosphere, however, there was a rigid structure of control. The documentary reveals how Rostan's charm masked manipulation and abuse. Members describe how he demanded total obedience, enforcing strict rules while isolating them from the outside world. His authority was absolute. He dictated where they lived, how they worked, and who they could love. Survivors recount how their sense of self slowly eroded, replaced by the constant need to please him. What makes Holy Hell particularly unsettling is its intimate footage. Allen filmed the group for years, capturing Rostan's speeches, rituals, and the faces of followers who believed they had found salvation. The result is a rare, unfiltered look inside the rise of a modern cult, told by someone who lived every moment of it. Number 6. Jonestown, Terror in the Jungle. The documentary Jonestown, Terror in the Jungle revisits one of the darkest tragedies in modern history. At its center is Jim Jones, the charismatic yet authoritarian leader of the People's Temple, who built a movement promising equality, racial harmony, and a utopian society. For many disillusioned Americans, his message was irresistible. What began in California as a progressive church grew into an international commune. Jones eventually moved his followers to Guyana, where he established Jonestown, a settlement meant to embody his vision of a perfect society. Instead, it became a place of isolation and fear. Members worked long hours, lived under constant surveillance, and endured endless sermons broadcast over loudspeakers day and night. Jones controlled every aspect of life, from food and medicine to relationships and travel. The documentary reveals chilling recordings of Jones addressing his followers, his voice at once soothing and menacing. Survivors recount how loyalty was demanded above all, and dissent was punished with public humiliation or worse. Armed guards patrolled the settlement, ensuring that no one could escape. Families were torn apart as devotion to Jones replaced any other bond. In November 1978, Jonestown descended into horror. At Jones's command, more than 900 men, women, and children consumed cyanide-laced flavor aid in what he called a revolutionary suicide. Entire families died together, their final moments recorded in haunting audio. The tragedy remains one of the largest mass deaths in American history. Number 5. Wild Wild Country. The Netflix series Wild Wild Country dives into the extraordinary rise and collapse of the Rajneeshpuram commune in rural Oregon during the 1980s. Led by the Indian guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, also known as Osho, the movement attracted thousands of followers from around the world. They sought enlightenment, freedom, and a new way of living, far from the constraints of modern society. At first, Rajneeshpuram appeared as a bold social experiment. Followers dressed in shades of red and orange, lived communally, and devoted themselves to meditation and the teachings of their leader. But tensions with local residents grew quickly as the group purchased vast stretches of land, built an entire city, and amassed wealth and power. The documentary highlights the role of Bhagwan's personal secretary, Ma Anand Sheela, who became the face and enforcer of the movement. She orchestrated strategies to defend the commune against outside opposition, including voter manipulation and an infamous bioterror attack that sickened hundreds. While Osho remained largely silent, Sheila's ruthless tactics transformed the utopian dream into a battle for survival. Archival footage and contemporary interviews show the magnetism that drew so many to the commune, alongside the mounting hostility of neighbors who watched it expand. The tension between Rajneeshpuram and the outside world grew sharper with each confrontation, as both sides prepared for an inevitable clash. Number 4. Children of God, Lost and Found. The Children of God, later rebranded as the Family International, was founded in the late 1960s by David Berg. What began as a countercultural Christian movement promising love and spiritual freedom quickly descended into one of the most notorious cults of the 20th century. The documentary Children of God. Lost and Found explores this world through the eyes of those who were born and raised inside the group. Berg's teachings promoted free love in communal living, but beneath the surface was a disturbing system of exploitation. Children were cut off from mainstream education, subjected to harsh discipline, and raised in isolation from the outside world. One of the most chilling aspects was the practice known as flirty fishing, where female members were encouraged to use sex as a means of recruitment and devotion. For those growing up inside the movement, boundaries between family, faith, and control were blurred beyond recognition. Survivors describe how songs, prayers, and rituals filled every hour of their childhood, leaving little room for individuality or freedom. The film gives voice to second-generation ex-members who recount the trauma of being forced into marriages, relocated across continents, and silenced whenever they ask questions. Their testimonies reveal how Berg's doctrine of love became a tool for manipulation, shaping a closed world where loyalty was demanded at any cost. We are now moving on to the top 3 of the list. If you have made it this far, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe to Vault of 15. Number 3. Waco, Madman or Messiah. The documentary Waco, Madman or Messiah revisits the story of David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, a sect that captured worldwide attention in the early 1990s. Koresh, born Vernon Howell, claimed to be the final prophet of God and drew hundreds of followers to a compound outside Waco, Texas. Life inside Mount Carmel was tightly controlled. Koresh dictated marriages, claimed multiple wives, some of them underage, and preached long, fiery sermons that reinforced his role as God's chosen leader. Firearms stockpiled within the compound only added to the sense of isolation and defiance. For his followers, surrendering to Koresh's authority meant salvation, while questioning him was treated as rebellion against God. The series combines FBI recordings, survivor interviews, and never-before-seen footage to show how devotion to Koresh created a closed world where his interpretation of Scripture justified total obedience. Women were pressured into giving themselves to him, while men were taught to see their loyalty tested through sacrifice and endurance. Families lived under his constant scrutiny, with every decision subject to his approval. In February 1993, federal agents raided the compound, sparking a standoff that lasted 51 days. Negotiations faltered and tensions escalated as the world watched on live television. On April 19th, the siege ended in flames when a fire engulfed Mount Carmel. 76 Branch Davidians, including Koresh, perished inside. Number 2. Seduced, inside the NXIVM cult. The documentary Seduced follows India Oxenberg's harrowing journey into NXIVM, a self-improvement group that began as leadership training and transformed into one of the most notorious cult scandals in recent history. Led by Keith Raniere, who styled himself as a visionary thinker, NXIVM attracted professionals, celebrities, and seekers eager for personal growth. Behind the facade of empowerment workshops and motivational seminars, Raniere established a rigid hierarchy where loyalty was rewarded and dissent crushed. Followers were encouraged to cut ties with outsiders, surrender financial control, and devote themselves fully to the organization. What looked like harmless networking events concealed a system of exploitation that preyed on vulnerability and ambition. Central to Seduced is the secret women's society known as DOS, where members were recruited under promises of mentorship but instead coerced into obedience. They were branded with Ranier's initials, subjected to strict diets, and required to provide collateral, compromising secrets or images that ensured silence. For India and many others, the process of breaking free meant confronting years of manipulation and control. The series uses intimate interviews and first-hand accounts to document how Ranier's influence reached into every aspect of his followers' lives. From relationships and careers to their sense of self, members were reshaped by his demands. The portrait that emerges is not of empowerment, but of submission disguised as growth, leaving scars long after the movement collapsed. Number 1. Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. Based on Lawrence Wright's book, the HBO documentary Going Clear takes an unflinching look at the Church of Scientology, one of the most secretive and powerful organizations in the world. Drawing on interviews with former high-ranking members, it exposes a system built on control, intimidation, and absolute devotion to its leadership. The film traces Scientology's origins under science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, who presented his teachings as a path to spiritual freedom through auditing and rigid training programs. What began as a self-help movement grew into a global church with immense wealth and influence, attracting Hollywood stars and ordinary seekers alike. For those who joined, however, the promise of enlightenment came with a heavy price. Former members recount how individuals were pressured to cut ties with family through disconnection, pushed into endless courses costing thousands of dollars, and subjected to harsh disciplinary measures. Stories emerge of surveillance, blackmail, and physical abuse within the organization's secretive compounds, where questioning the hierarchy was treated as betrayal. The documentary also explores the church's aggressive defense tactics, from relentless lawsuits to campaigns against critics. Public image was polished with celebrity endorsements, while the inner workings remained hidden from view. Those who left described the difficulty of breaking free, not only from the organization's reach, but from the psychological grip of its teachings. We hope you found this episode both eye-opening and disturbing. These documentaries don't just tell stories of control. They remind us how fragile trust can be and how dangerous blind faith becomes in the wrong hands. Thank you for watching, and join us again for more journeys into the strange, the shocking, and the unforgettable. And remember, truth is in the list.